You know, and one of the most beautiful things, and I hope that everyone, and I think that I've ever read of all the workings on Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the most fascinating things that I've ever read and been able to digest is step 4 and 12 and 12, if you can see in the beauty that Bill describes self. He describes self there in a few short pages like nothing I have ever been able to see anywhere. What is self-will in man? He said God gave man certain social instincts. You know, we have a feeling of companionship. You know, that's a natural thing that we all have. We need that. Why? Because we can't do anything without each other. You know, man has to have other men and other women too to do anything. We do very few things on our own. We might say tonight, you know, that we fed ourselves, but we really didn't feed ourselves. You know, it took many, many people to grow the food and truck drivers to haul it, and people in the grocery store to help us be able to eat tonight. That we don't do really anything on the face of this earth without other people. In fact, over the Serenity House one morning, we went down the table and picked our minds and what could a man do? We do it constantly, almost every group, and try to figure out what can a man can do by himself. And we come up, you know, you can't dress yourself because somebody else makes the clothes. You can't go to the bathroom by yourself, really. Somebody put the water up there and the plumbing up there and the paper up there. You really can't. We figured out as well, one thing that you can do by yourself is not very attractive. You can die by yourself. And then some folks going to have to haul you off, so really, I don't know. Everything else, it takes companion. So this is our survival instincts. These are God-given. God wanted man to survive, so he placed in us these instincts. And part of these social instincts make up a thing called self. He gave us another part of our instinct is our security instinct. We all have a feeling of, if we didn't harvest food, he says, or construct shelter, there would be no survival. And there's a feeling within each and every one of us of security. And this is our survival instincts. Emotional and material security. And this is what makes the world go around today. Everybody out there has went to work this morning, and there's one person goes to work, the garbage man went to work, the plumber went to work, the doctor went to work, the lawyer went to work, the fireman went to work. All these people had to go to work to make this whole thing work. And they didn't go to work this morning because they like to go to work. They went to security sent them to work this morning. You know, need more, as we used to say. That's what makes us work. So security is a part of self. And then he says, you know, there's one other area, our sex instincts. If it wasn't for sex, the man wouldn't reproduce. If we wouldn't reproduce, there would be no survival of the human race. So our social instincts that we have to bring us together, our security instincts that gives us the drive to fulfill those, and our sex instincts, all these things together make up a thing called self. And this is the foundation of a human life. So these instincts were placed in man, you know, the companionship, the social instincts, the security instincts, and the sex instincts were placed in us to produce our society. And all together, these group of instincts make up a thing called self. Self, we're the only animals that have this set of instincts. And it's called self-will. And as we satisfy these things, they do produce our society. But Bill says also, when these things get out of control, instead of them being the instincts that make life, they become a self-destructive process. Self is the root of all human problems. You know, the things we talked about earlier, the social instincts, you know, the security instincts, the sex instincts. Every person is in problems and has a problem in his life tonight, and there are a lot of people with a lot of problems, not only alcoholics. people in prisons, people in penitentiaries. Every person is in trouble as a result of one of those instincts out of control. You know, did he steal because of trying to satisfy his companion instinct? Or was he trying to build his self-esteem? Is that the reason he stole? Did he steal for material security? Or did he steal because of sex? One part of self caused him to do that. Self is the root of all human problems. So this is what we make this decision. Now, we're not going to get rid of this thing. Only God's will. There are but two wills on the face of this earth, the will of man and the will of God. And so we make the decision here to turn this thing, to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand. And if self-will is only God, if self-will is God-made, then only God can correct self-will. Our book says we can never correct self-will with self-will. You know, that was my problem. I was always going to make me good. And I could never get the job done. It's like we say, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire, is to use self-will on a self-will problem. So here we make a decision. And this is but a decision. We don't turn it over here. We make a decision to. We'll make a decision to turn this. Who do we tells us what to do? Make a decision. It tells us what to turn over, our will and our lives. And we said that was our thinking and our actions. It tells us which specific items to turn over. And it tells us who to turn them over to. Step 3 is a very simple, precise step. It tells us what to do, make a decision to turn over, which 2 items to turn over, and who we're going to turn them over to. A God of our understanding. And if we could follow this simple directions, this step is so simple. It didn't say turn them over to God. It said a God of our understanding. And it said deep down every man, woman, child is a fundamental conception of God. It's been there all our lives. And this is the only way that we can understand God, is through our understanding of God. You know, and I look at God is just like going out here to Razorback Stadium to a football game, and they got 55,000 people in there. And we're all sitting around that stadium. And the amazing thing of it, if we really look at it, no two of us see the same thing. Because in that total arena, each and every one of us has a different angle, even than the one that's right next to us. So nobody sees the game but through my eyes. Nobody sees God through my eyes. We only see God through our lives, through our footsteps. Every person on the face of this earth no one has ever walked in my footsteps. So I think, this is, I've seen many great expressions of this, and one of my favorite is David, who had said, the Lord is my shepherd. Now, I had a lot of, for many years I couldn't understand where he was coming from, but I had to realize that this man as a child had worked as a shepherd. This was his work. And this was his conception of God. God as he understood him. He said, I see God as us. The Lord is my shepherd, he said. And remember, he had worked as a shepherd. He said, I shall not want. And David remembered when he was a shepherd, he would graze the sheep during the day. And as these sheep grazed, it was the shepherd's responsibility to select the pasture for the next day. While the sheep was grazing, the shepherds would survey the pastures for the next day, and the sheep would say, I shall not want. No, the sheep never did say, hey, where are we going to eat tomorrow? They didn't make him know that. That was the shepherd's job, wasn't it? And he said he'd make him to lie down in green valleys, and they would make the sheep come in and lay down. They would get them down, and the sheep he would eat the whole time he stood up. And when they make the sheep lay down, they would chew their cuds. They wouldn't eat anymore, and they would chew their cuds. And they would digest the grass in their stomachs. And after they digested the grass, then the shepherds would get them up and lead them over to still water. The shepherds would have to dam up the brooks because the sheep by nature, as he is covered with wool, he's very afraid of water. And he will only drink out of still water. So the shepherds would have to prepare these brooks. And he talked about this power. David saw God as an all-caring force that cared for the sheep because he had worked as this. This was his conception of God. You know, the guy that saw him, he said, he is the captain of my ship. He was a sailor. You know, each and every one of us has a conception of God from our own lifestyle or from our own experience or from the footsteps we walk in. And this is the only way we're going to ever understand God. And our book says this is the conception, God as we understand it. We make a decision to turn him over to that God of our understanding. And then when he talks about it, he says this is the beginning. This is the beginning. This decision is the beginning of recovery, of the recovery process. So this is a turning point. And only we as individuals can have this decision, and we will all, as long as we're alive, we'll have this decision. We can make a decision to run the show, continue to run the show. We can do that. Because it's a God-given thing. They don't even put a man in the penitentiary for self-will. They put him in there for what self-will causes. They can't take it away from him. When he gets out, he can exercise the same thing. And this is what we do in our lives. So this is the root of all human problems, so we make this decision. And of course, the whole process of these steps is how to find this power. And our book says that this is the beginning. And it says sometimes a great effect is felt, but in most cases it's not. The third step is just a decision to do something. Now, we don't turn our will over in the life of the care of God in step 3. We make a decision to do it. And decision implies further actions. And step 3 is just a beginning. He says sometime we get an effect in the case of the sudden spiritual experience. But in most cases, it's going to be a gradual change over a period of time. So we just made a decision. And I think, as we look back on this decision, it's going to talk about carrying out this decision. We just make a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God. The process of really doing this comes through step 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and even 10. These are the steps, actually, that clear away the things that block us from this decision. There are certain things within us that block us from God. Step 3 is just a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God. And what we have to do is remove the things that block us from God, because God is within man. It didn't say we had to. People say around here, you got to find God. Well, God ain't lost. He's been here a long time, and if you've been here long, you can't get lost. I hear them tell about the story, and I love this story. I tell it a lot about. God, when He created this world, He was that they didn't really know what He was all about. All His angels was doing different jobs, and they had their conceptions of what it was going to be like. And they started building this big throne up on the mountain for God, and God said, "Oh no, I want to be that obvious in this thing." We said, "We thought that since you did all this, it should be yours. You should be." He said, "No, I don't want to be that obvious in it." He said, "I would like to be where I couldn't be seen." So they decided we'll put him on the ocean, and they started building the thing down the ocean. And he said, "Oh no, I don't want to be down there." He said, "Man, to get down there, he'll find everything. Eventually, he's going to get down there." They said, "Well, where do you want to be? Where are you going to be in this world, God? Where can we put you?" He said, "I think I'll just be inside of every man. He will never look back." So God is within us. And right within us, whatever our concept is, whatever our conception, it don't have to be big, it don't have to be like David's, it don't have to be that pretty, but whatever we as individuals, that is the only way that we're going to contact God, is that thing within us. Amen. So this is where we begin. We make a decision to turn it over. And it's small, it's inadequate, and it's weak. And we never have used it because we've been traveling on self. But we just make the decision to turn it over to that, whatever it is, and then we're going to go to work to clear away the things that block us off of this and make this thing grow into something that can direct our lives. So step 3 is just a decision. It's the beginning. In fact, step 3 comes, a decision comes before really the beginning, or really to me is step 4. Because step 3 says this is just a decision. Say, if honestly and taken, sometime is effect, sometime a great one is felt at once, but in most cases, there is no great sensation from making a decision. He said, next we have to launch on a vigorous course of action. Yeah. And to identify the things that block us off. We got to get down to the things that block us off from God. If we want God to direct our lives, it's taking a lot of work. So the next steps, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, is carrying out the decision in step 3. The decision is just the beginning. You know, a lot of times I hear people say, well, I'll come to AA and I had a lot of problems because I determined my will in my life for care of God 5 years ago and I'm having trouble. What's the matter? I said, well, when I took the 3rd step, I said, well, you didn't turn your will in you made a decision to do that. And the chances are, reason they're in trouble is they haven't done anything since they made that decision. You know what I mean? It's just like going down to the bank and making a decision to save some money. You go down there and you make a decision to save some money and open up a bank account. And don't go back down there in 5 years and see how much money you got. You just made a decision. You know, it's going down there every week, taking that action to carry out that decision. This is what really it's all about. But step 3 is just the beginning. And we have made this decision. So now in step 4, we're going to identify the things that block us off from God. And God is within us. And so obviously we're blocked off from it because it's not a viable force in our lives. It's not working, but it's there. It's within every individual. But there's something that blocks us from God. So step 4 is to identify these things so that we can get to work on this decision. Remember we said he wanted them to direct it. So we got to get down and identify these things. And in step 5, we're going to talk them out with someone else. In step 6, we're going to become willing to let go of them. And in step 7, we're going to ask God to remove those things. And then that decision is going to be, that direction is going to be able to come in. God will be able to start directing our lives. Carrying out and the decision will begin to grow. And for the rest of our lives, that we can intensify this as we re-practice these action steps. You know, getting closer and closer to God's directions in our lives. But step 3 is just the beginning. It's the decision, it's the turning point. Next week we'll go into step 4, in which we'll begin to identify the things that block us from this decision. Next week we'll go into step 4.